want to introduce our dear friend Victoria Santos, who some of you met yesterday at the session with Brenda. And Victoria, it's a dear friend and a beautiful community holder, facilitator, intuitive, I would say circle holder. That's how we met Victoria. And she's been part of our SEN community and team since last year. And we're delighted to have Victoria with us, and she will be facilitating the next conversation with Alua.
Yeah, very simply, Victoria has the capacity to hold a space like nobody else. Nobody else. I saw her in action. I mean, I'm still in awe what you did when you met with 200 people screaming at each other, and she just simple said one word, and you have such an ability to feel and to feel the field and how to. So it's such an honor to have you. Having you in our team makes me feel safer. As I always tell you, you make me feel safe. So I'm sure. And I'll leave to you the floor and to advance this beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Mauricio, and welcome everyone. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. This is such an important conversation for us to be in, and I am deeply honored to be part of the team. And I would like to introduce to you our beautiful Alua Arthur. She is a deaf doula, an attorney, and the founder of Going with Grace, an end-of-life planning organization that exists to support people as they answer the question, what must I do to be at peace with myself so that I might live presently and die peacefully? From a private end to life consultation to online coursework to training deaf doula, she is tirelessly committed to bringing awareness to death and dying, which she believes can inspire the way that people live. A jewelry addict, Alua is also a life lover, a bicyclist, a fanatic for developing nation enthusiast. She's inspired by life, the little joys that we can find even in the darkest time, the freedom of authenticity, and the power of the word yes. Alua, my friend, my new friend, I turn it over to you now.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with everybody. Although coming on the heels of Stephen Jenkinson, I really wish I had a band. I really wish I had a band. I think I need a band. Might land the point a little bit better. Maybe make the medicine go down a little smoother. Really honored to be here with you all today and to spend some time in conversation about the work itself, and honored that you all have chosen to spend your day talking about dying and living.
So tell us a little bit about how do you end up going into this path? I mean, you're a lawyer and, and here you are now, a doula and helping people.
Admittedly, it's unusual. I practiced law at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. After I graduated from college, I was uncertain about what I wanted to do with myself, but I have a strong innate desire for justice. Something inside of me sees a system that she thinks isn't working and wants to tear it down and start over. I'm an activist by nature, but it also means I'm incredibly righteous, for better or worse. And so I went into social justice work and spent some time working with domestic violence victims and sexual assault survivors at Legal Aid and community economic development. But after a while, I really started to burn out on the work. It felt as though I was constantly coming up against a system that wasn't built to support the people it intended to, or at least with the immense amount of resources we have in the United States, the resources weren't being allocated in a way that I thought was appropriate. As I mentioned, I'm pretty righteous. What initially started out as a dissatisfaction in work blossomed into a clinical depression when I wasn't feeling satisfied in my work. It's such a light way to put it, but realistically, I was getting a big wake-up call from within that something wasn't working. Depression for me served as the agitator cycle to my spirit that something was out of alignment. And in continuing to ignore it, it got louder and louder and louder to the point where I could no longer fight it, nor could I function normally. And I had to take a leave of absence from work. During that time, I went to Colorado to go visit a good friend, and went into the practice of meditation as a reminder to myself that the answers that I'm always looking for are not outside of me, but rather it's important for me to go within to go and find them. And I started thinking about a kid from the 90s named Elian Gonzalez, who came over on a raft from Cuba with his.
That. Yes, I remember that story.
Right. And this was in 2012. I hadn't thought about Elian Gonzalez in a very long time, but the image of him in a closet with his, I think it was his uncle, when he was captured and was supposed to be sent back to Cuba by the SWAT team. That image was in my mind. I couldn't shake it. And so I spent a bunch of time researching him and what had happened to him after that time, and started thinking a lot about Cuba. I went to the library to go return a book on an NDE, and I met a Greenpeace worker there that had a bag that said Cuba te espera on it. Cuba is waiting. And since I'd spent the morning thinking about Cuba anyway, I thought, well, boy, and I was willing to take any sign I would get. I mean, if a bird had pooped on my head, I would have thought it was a gift from the heavens. So I was like, I'm going to Cuba, everybody. And everybody thought it was nuts, but I was certain that that was the thing I was supposed to do. It turns out it was. So I went to Cuba. I went to Cuba. And there one day I was out trying to get myself to the bus, and a car had almost hit me along the way. And I slammed my hands on the hood and thought immediately, get it together, don't die in these streets, your parents will never forgive you. So I made it to the bus stop in time, started chatting with a woman in line. She had a tattoo of a pen on her arm. We spent a bunch of time in conversation. And then eventually I got on the bus. She was on the same bus. She was a German traveler named Jessica, who was on a trip to see the top 6 places in the world she wanted to see before she died, because she had uterine cancer. And during this bus ride, I was so shocked by the fact that she would die, which is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Death is not a secret, yet we treat it in this culture as though it is. And I was shocked. And she was also just a few years older than I was, and it blew my mind that somebody my age could also die. Up until that point in my life, aside from the deaths of like Michael Jackson and Princess Diana, and a kid that had gone to my high school that died, he had an enlarged heart, death had been something that was not in my consciousness at all. I was also a philosophy major in undergrad, but we waxed poetic about it. It was never real. It was never personal. It wasn't ever anything I really had to look at. And so I really started looking at it with her. I asked her a lot of questions about her life and her death and what would happen if this disease killed her. And in her beautiful deadpan delivery, she said, well, I'll be dead. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's accurate. That's what would happen. So we spent a lot of time just talking about life and death, and the fact that we both had diseases when left untreated could lead to death, because depression is a terminal, and that phrase is certainly in question, but depression in and of itself is a terminal illness when left untreated. So during that bus ride, I really started to wonder about how we as a culture have pushed death and dying so far away that me, an otherwise engaged and thoughtful human, was shocked by the conversation. I also noticed that Jessica had not been given enough opportunities to talk about her fears or thoughts around death and dying, because every time she'd bring it up, people in her life would say, oh, don't worry about that, you're gonna get better, nothing to worry about. And it became a conversation that she was sitting with by herself. And the fact that people were denying the existence of something we all know to be true was akin to some type of existential gaslighting. Like there was no space to talk about the fact that she would die. They wanted her to believe otherwise. And it's absurd at best, but also really lonesome and isolating. During that ride, I thought, people, we can do better. We should do better. So I can do that. The punchline is that Jessica stayed with me for the duration of the bus ride, 14 hours. And we go to the guest house I'd rented, and come to find out she was in that car that had almost hit me when I was in the street 14 hours later. So we were on a just straight crash course with the work itself that I was going to do with my life. I didn't know it yet then, but 8 years later, here we are.
Wow. Wow. How beautiful. It was like your story just shows how like destiny's like meeting you right there at the crossroads. You're literally crossing the road and you're getting the message, and here you are and you follow the path. But I am also very curious because you, as you're talking about your own depression and having to shift your life, and like, and if left untreated, depression can actually cost, become a cause of death. Definitely, I had the same experience like with my mother. My mother also became very depressed and unfortunately ended up dying from it. So I definitely know that it's so real. But it seems like in the conversation that you engage with Jessica, right? It was that you were also getting very intimate with her. Tell me about that intimacy with death, and maybe even what you were going through for yourself.
There's no way to escape intimacy when talking about death and dying. There's no way to escape it because it is the most intimate act we'll do, but even our thoughts about it are something we hold so deep within the psyche that we do carry them on our outsides, but only people that are willing to see it being carried on the outsides will see it. But it's a very intimate act in a conversation to talk about death and dying. There's something about being on a bus with a stranger in a foreign country, and for me, I was certainly hungover, that will allow you to have conversations that you wouldn't normally have with your stranger or your mother. All types of formalities just go out the window, and all of a sudden we're talking about deep personal things because we thought we'd never see each other again, but there were other things in store. But there's such an intimacy in discussing fears and hopes and dreams, and but certainly questions about the afterlife. I asked her to think about her body decaying in a grave. We went there. We went all the way there during the 14 hours together. I don't know where I found the hubris to do so. I think depression and, as I mentioned, hungover really helped.
Mm-hmm. The composting, going there and composting of the body. What do you think? I mean, look where we are now, right? During this time, and so many people have transitioned, right? What do you think we need to let go of right now during this time? What needs to be composted?
What a big question.
I know. I'm going there. You're a deaf doula, baby. Take me
down.
there.
Let's go there. Let's go there.
Let's go there.
Letting go is a big work that we're all doing over the course of our lives, right? Until we get to the actual letting go, when we let go of the body itself. At this point, we have invitations time and again to look at what actually serves us. I keep saying that this time for me has been like a trimming of the fat. I mean, aside from the other fat that's coming on because of all the potato chips I'm eating, but like a trimming of the fat of our lives. Let's keep that one to ourselves. A trimming of the fat of our lives. Like all the things that don't serve me in any real way are starting to fall away naturally. My relationships, the people I choose to spend my time with, I started to get rid of some stuff. The attitudes or the ways of being in the world that didn't work for me before, things are slowly just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And we have an opportunity now to practice that letting go. Obviously, the big letting go of the body, we don't really get to practice. We can practice in the little things like releasing plants or too many shoes. I have so many shoes. Releasing shoes and releasing relationships, releasing old patterns and belief systems. Mm-hmm. Just the release of the things that don't serve who we are at this moment, time and again.
Thank you for that. Releasing of everything, all the patterns, all the things that don't serve, all the things that we have accumulated, and all the old beliefs that are no longer serving us, that's keeping us from being intimate with what's possible for us, and also our own death, right? Because death is certain.
Absolutely. Also in releasing according to our values, like looking very clearly at who I am, what I value, and acting from that place. Because so far, for a lot of us, we move according to what we think that we should do. And the shoulds are the things that keep us in these really tight boxes. Yet time and again, we keep getting asked to step into our own authenticity. What is my unique expression of humanhood? And how does that unique expression show up in concert with other people? And so time and again, especially lately, checking in with what that unique, authentic expression of my humanhood is, and moving from that point. I mentioned earlier that death is the most intimate act that we'll do, but it's also important that we get very intimate with ourselves in our living so that we can meet ourselves at our deathbed, because we're going to meet that person time and again. It's going to be me and me. When it's time for my death to happen, I need to get as intimate with myself as possible, over and over and over, and practice for that ultimate releasing and letting go.
So you're working and being in relationship with families as members are transitioning. Can you tell me a little bit about and tell us a little bit about how to be with the grief and the loss during those times? How do you?
It's difficult. It's difficult. I teach death doulas at Going with Grace, and yesterday I had the opportunity to be in conversation with about 8 of the students. And one of the students asked, well, what do you do when the air is so heavy and it's thick, and how do you shift it? How do you move it? And that's, to me, evidence of a belief system that says that, difficulty or pain is not acceptable and it's not okay. And it's something that we have to do about it. There's no fixing death. There's no fixing grief. There's simply being with it. Yet so many of us that enter into this work or want to be with those that are dying have a desire to help somehow. And that help suggests that exactly what is happening is not okay, and we have to do something about it instead. We have to make it better. And so the work itself is with being with it for exactly what it is, not needing it to be any lighter or happier or more intense or anything else, just being with people as they are. That's the most honoring and human thing I can do, is to see another where they are for who they are and have that be okay time and again. Yeah, I should probably spend a little bit of time talking about the work itself so that you're not spending any time wondering what the hell is a death doula.
Yeah, I want to do that. And I also would like for you to, because even as you're speaking, and I know that I would like to hear more about your spiritual background. Like, how do you ground yourself in this work? Because there's a lot of joy in you, and there's also like a very deep groundedness that's coming through when you speak of this work. And I'm wondering what your spiritual grounding is.
Well, I grew up an evangelical Christian. My parents found Jesus at separate times, although when they were separated, but they were, my dad was in prison in Ghana. He was a member of the parliament that got overthrown in a military coup. So he went to political asylum, and my mother, with 3 children and pregnant with another, moving to a foreign country to try to reestablish herself when my dad was in prison, also found Jesus. I can imagine that both those circumstances are things that will certainly drive people to seek out a higher power. And when they reconciled, they decided to move through the world spreading Jesus, consider themselves missionaries from Africa to the rest of the world. They thought the Western world needs Jesus more than Africa does. So we hit the ground as missionaries and spread Jesus for far and wide for years. At a certain point in my life, I was sitting front row in churches for most of my upbringing. And I was listening and I thought, some of this stuff I can dig and some of this stuff I don't really dig. Now, let me ask a bunch of questions and see what sticks and what doesn't. So the questions I asked, though, weren't always really welcome. I'll put it lightly. They were not very welcome. And a lot of times I just had to suspend belief or suspend, whatever I was thinking in order to go with it. It wasn't really working for me. As curious as I am as an adult, I was doubly so as a child. And I was searching for something that I couldn't find the answers for. Or I would read the words in the book, and then I would hear them tell me what the word said, and something wasn't adding up for me. And so I just went searching. I dug into most major religions. I've always wanted to be Jewish because I also thought, well, we are praising Jesus, but Jesus was Jewish. So why are we just not Jewish? Why are we doing the thing that he's doing, but a different thing? I spent a bunch of time cobbling together beliefs, and they keep getting tested, which I really enjoy. And they get tested every single time I'm sitting with somebody and I'm watching them through the end of their life. I certainly think of myself as an opportunity broken off from some beautiful piece of something else to get to be here, to be in this body, to experience life through this body, to touch and to see and to smell and to taste and to, get into the yick of life, to feel. All that stuff is the joy to me in being human. And I'd say one of my most foundational spiritual beliefs is what a gift it is to play as a human.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, go ahead and explain a little bit more about what does a death doula do, and and also a little bit more about your trainings and all of that stuff.
Sure. So at Going with Grace, we're an end-of-life planning and support organization. We provide all full-scale medical, non-medical end-of-life support for the dying and the family through the process. It's a holistic job that a death doula does. We work in 3 categories, mostly. When people are healthy, we can help them complete comprehensive end-of-life plans. And I use healthy very, very lightly, okay? No bodies do all things. And also health is a strange standard that we live by. But when people don't yet know what it is that they're going to be dying of, we help them complete comprehensive end-of-life plans, going through everything from their healthcare decision-making and the desires for life support to their accounts and their passwords. We go through their possessions, care for their dependents and pets, etc. When they are a little bit more clear about what it is that they're going to be dying of, because there's an illness that seems it's not going to be treated any longer, we help them conceive of the most ideal death for them under the circumstances. That means if they want to be at home, help them create the deathbed, help them work through any things that are left undone. Either it's practical, like their affairs aren't in order, or it's emotional, there are relationships that need focus and attention. Spiritual, they have concerns or thoughts about what, if anything, comes after we die. So the different areas that people need support are varied, and the death doula is there to support. We're there just as a support person, being with them where they are, but also offering resources and compassion and a space to play around with these conversations that other people really seem to struggle with. The way that I think of the work is we can be a one-stop end-of-life shopping, where there are several different teams that do the work elsewhere, but the death doula, in my opinion, should have enough knowledge about the rest of the system so that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't know how to get rid of all these medications now. Or where do we get a hospital gown that opens on the side rather than the back, because that's too hard to lift her body to put into it. So we have resources. We can find grief support people. We can help people find hospice, etc. After somebody dies, we can also help family members wrap up the affairs of their loved one's life. So, you know, how, if any of you have ever experienced the death of somebody that you love, you know that there is just a mountain of duties to be done afterward, and death doulas can help ease that as well. So that's some of the major work that we do. At Going with Grace, we do all of those things. Additionally, I've been training death doulas now for 2 years. So far, we've trained about 500 doulas in 19 countries, which is so rad. The training program is 12 weeks online. We look at conscious dying, and we look at our own deaths. We consider the art of medicine and signs of dying, being with dying, dying. We look at the practical things as well, like what are the estate planning documents. We look at the funeral industry. We look at all areas of dying so that the people that graduate this program have a strong, holistic basket of tools to support the dying. Yeah, and not all death doulas do all things, but some do most.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I'm going to ask you, if you were to think of us, all of us right now on this planet, as our death doula,
okay,
what would be some of the lessons that you think we need to know?
Oh, wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'd start certainly with presence. Bringing ourselves back to where we are at this moment. I have certainly had moments in the last few months, certainly in the early days of the pandemic, in the toilet paper buying days, in the Tiger King days, where I was really, I was experiencing a lot of suffering of the other people, where I was worried about people that were, you know, losing income, and people stuck in homes that were abusive, or those that didn't have enough money, or whatever else, just really struggling with it myself. I'm highly empathic by nature, and had to keep coming back to who, you know, what is my current experience, my actual current experience, not the one that I'm imagining. Where are my feet planted firmly on the ground right now? What do I see? What do I touch? What do I smell? Bringing myself right back to this moment time and again, because trying to future cast wasn't working. Nobody knows anyway. And far be it from us to try to pretend that we know. And also to stop living in the past and certainly not being with the anxiety that wasn't present for me, but was for other people. So bringing myself back into the present in my own experience and grounding my experience time and again. Another really powerful one has been about this idea of future casting. You know, we like to have ideas about control or what's going to happen next, while knowing that none of us know what's happening in the very next moment. Nobody knows. And we get to release control around it. And I think that this pandemic has certainly been an opportunity for people to see that they don't know what's happening in the next 3 months. And so let's stop pretending like we do. Let's stop pretending like we do. None of us know. But yet we hold on so tight to what we think we already know and what should be. But I mean, a meteor could go through the sky. Any moment could be my last. I don't know. None of us know. Being with the unknown and moving away from this idea that we know or that we should know somehow, and that we're failing as humans when we don't. In fact, it is the actual human experience to be in this constant state of unknowing and showing up for that moment.
So you would encourage us to have presence, to stop future casting, and to be with the unknown, to show up for the moment.
Yes. You're a fantastic listener.
I also take a little note. That sounds like really, really good advice. Thank you. Thank you. And on that note, I'm looking over at Mauricio and Zaya and wondering if you want to have any questions, or if we should turn it over to our community now and see if anybody have any questions.
Anything just to keep hearing more of Alua. I just want to.
Alua,
your energy and what you.
It's infectious. I mean, it's contagious. I mean, Stephen Jenkins said it's never too late to become a rock star, and I was wondering. You said that you need a band, so we have the next gig together.
I think I might have to. That was great. Yeah, take a show on the road.
Such a joy. Such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
I would like to open it up to the community and see if anyone has any questions, and then you and I can continue our dialogue, okay? But I know that, you know, especially since we're in this community, there might be some questions just about the logistics of things, you know, and that's your wheelhouse. So I really want to open it up. If anyone has any questions or comment, please raise your hands and we'll bring your voice in.
Shall we hear someone we haven't heard of yet? Rena, unmute.
Rena.
Do you have a video?
Yes.
Yes, great, beautiful.
Yeah. Hi, Alua. How are you?
Oh.
Great to see you here. I just started taking your online course, and I'm just at the beginning, but I remember you said something about death not being an equalizer. And although I understood the answer, I think it's important to talk about it here. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, sure. We've talked about, and I've heard so many ideas about death as a great equalizer. And absolutely, we all are born and we will all die, right? Those things there are two fixed points of change in our lifetimes. I'll say that. There are two fixed points of change. And so in that way, it is equal. Yet what is unequal is how we're not living equally, and thus we're not dying equally. We're dying of different causes. There is massive disparities in race and class, and even some in gender, about what it is that ends up leading to our death. We think of death as a thing that equals a playing field, but it doesn't, because it's based on so many social and class power dynamics that aren't always evident right off the surface, but certainly exist. When we think of death as a social construct that is informed by power dynamics, we see that it's not at all equal. It's not equal. We don't come into it equally, and thus we're not dying equally. We are all dying, but we're not dying equally. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I wonder if you wanted to elaborate on, what it means to be, the difference between dying as a white person and dying as a Black person, particularly.
Well, I don't know either, as I'm still living in this body talking through this mouth, but I will tell you what I've observed so far, that there are major systemic issues. Systemic racism is something that, gratefully the rest of the world now is starting to pay attention to. Although living in this body, in this country, it's on my mind regularly, but I am glad to see that now other people are paying attention to the conversation as well. That the ways in which the medical system and the social power dynamics are set up don't necessarily support all. There are numerous studies about white doctors that think that Black people have fewer nerve endings and thus we don't experience as much pain, or how we are treated in funeral homes, or certainly by medical care providers. There was recently a video that I could only watch a little bit of, where there's a First Nations woman who had set up a camera in her hospital room because she'd been asking for a pain medication and it wasn't given to her. And so she started to speak very loudly about what was happening to her in the hospital, and left her video on while she was broadcasting and fell into a coma. She fell unconscious. And the medical care team came in and they talked about how stupid she was, and that the state was probably paying for all of her medical care, and that she didn't deserve the care that she was getting. She ended up dying on camera, and this was captured. This was weeks ago. What, let's see, Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color are experiencing out there is something that many of us have been jumping up and down about for a while. And while it's so easy to point to all the systems that set us up right now as being long gone, slavery 450 years ago, this ended then, like, get over it already. But we are still in the waves of what happened then today. And while it might not be patently as obvious, it still exists. And our opportunity now is to look at all the places that we internally still hold judgment and bias toward another, and look at those things within so that we can ultimately help work through the system that is not serving all equally, and thus does not create a great equalizer at death.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, let's take a breath with that.
Yeah, let's take a moment here. This is huge to take in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beatrice, you are unmuted.
Beatrice?
now.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm a different Beatrice than last time. I'm in California, Italian heritage, but not the same. So my question, thank you so much, Alua. I just finished a master's degree studying contemporary views of death in this country, and built an artistic installation for grief processing. And I very much feel called to do this work for the rest of my life. I feel a very strong passion and calling and pull towards the work of death and end of life and holding space for grief. And I've actually been thinking about being a death doula. I'm considering a lot of different options of how to go this way. But I also, what I want to ask to you is about being an empath. Deeply empathic and moved by other people's experiences and energies and emotions. And I am very much that way. I get very deeply moved and rattled by other people's experience and feel it very deeply. And so I wanted to ask you how you navigate that in walking through these spaces again and again with families and with people who are dying. And I'm sure that, especially if you're there with them for a long time, or for the duration of their illness and death process, that you probably form some attachments to them, or at least some compassion and friendship. And so how do you navigate the depth of the empathic reaction, and also can hold space for them and not make it about you? You know what I mean? So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Great question. It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. It's a big old work to be done time and time again. Because as I mentioned, so many of us that come into this work want to do so because our hearts are broken open by the suffering of others, and we want to help and want to make things better and want to help. But the reality is that there's nothing to be done to fix it, right? I can offer resources, I can offer support, I can offer kind words, but I can't make it any better. And that, unless we spend a lot of time looking at what parts of myself I'm collapsing with the experience of the other, I will not be able to be of any support. Let me back up. Very early in my legal career, the summer after I started law school, I worked in South Brooklyn Legal Services in the HIV and AIDS unit. And there was a young woman that came in just about my age who had a 6-year-old son who had AIDS, and I was to support her in her housing discrimination claim. When I tell you I did everything from go to the grocery store with this woman to help her tie her shoes, I did not understand the boundaries. I didn't understand. My supervisor sat me down. I wish I could remember her name because I'd send her a cupcake right now. But she sat me down and she said, you are not going to last in this work as long as you cannot see the space between you and her. You have to find some space between the two of you. You're collapsing the space between the two. And I thought, well, if I was in that position, I would want everybody to do something. I would want people to do everything for me. And she said, well, you are not in that position. She is in that position. Let her have her experience. And I thought, oh, what a novel idea. What a novel idea. When thinking about this work in particular, we come at it from the empathy perspective, but to me, it can be challenging and dangerous. I, as a healthy, relatively, 42-year-old Black woman, does not know what the experience of another relatively healthy 40-year-old Black woman is. There are some things that are similar, yet when she's on her deathbed, I can't show up and put myself in her position because I don't know what her position is, I know mine. So rather than try to put myself in her shoes, I have to say consistently, I don't know what your experience is, but I'm gonna be here in the trenches with you. Every single time we put ourselves in the position of another, we collapse the space between the two, which is dangerous in this work, because then we're showing up for them as we would want people to show up for us, not how they want us to show up for them. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a hard work to be done, drawing those boundaries, finding my own edges. But for those of us that are really porous by nature, we got to time and again check in with what those boundaries are. About dealing with grief with families for a long time, I grieve a lot. I'm grieving for my clients, I'm grieving with my clients, I'm grieving for myself because when my friends has died after spending a bunch of time with somebody at the end, I do a lot to try to maintain my sanity and my groundedness. I let myself grieve quite a bit. I let myself grieve.
Can I ask what some, if you have a couple of things you can offer to us of what you do for yourself to navigate that?
Self-compassion.
As a big picture, just honoring whatever is present at the time. Sometimes it's potato chips, which I eat a lot of. I like salty, crunchy things in my jam. But I have a Chase lounge right here that looks out onto some magnolia trees. I daydream a lot. I talk to friends. I spend time with lovers. I take baths. I meditate regularly, as I mentioned, but I think of that more as maintenance rather than like an additional practice to keep myself grounded. But I let myself feel things, you know, I cry a lot. Me and my tears are good friends. I cry a lot.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking. It's a great question.
Wow, these are amazing practices you're giving. These are deep spiritual practices that we need for any relationship.
Any relationship.
Absolutely. Being grounded and allowing
never assume what's on the other side. We have no idea. We don't know.
No idea. Such a limited human perspective.
Yeah.
Yet many think, oh, I don't get me wrong. I certainly believe that there is an undercurrent that is in us all, right? That as within, so without. However, the play of being human is to be in my experience. This is the eyes that I see through. These are the hands that I use to touch. I don't know what it is like to be you. And we make so many assumptions about the other. If we can approach the other from a sense of curiosity and humility, what is your experience like? Whoa, what color do you see? Wow, it looks like blue to me. What is blue to you? Let's just start there as a baseline.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Dr.
G, you're unmuted now.
Good morning. Hey, Lord, thank you for your time and good to see you. I'm still, what a wonderful space for you to follow Stephen Jenkins. I'm still reeling from that. But I'm also connecting the two because they feel like both conversations are in conversation with one another. My question is around birth, actually. We have a habit, at least in the Western world, is my only reference point, to compartmentalize our life experiences. And so we're spending a lot of time speaking about death, but when I think about birth, the two have a conversation between one another, like death and birth. And so I'm kind of wondering if there is any conversation with birth doulas and death doulas, and what the valuable lessons might be between the two, because I'm like thinking about, the rate of infant mortality rate with Black women versus white women. And I'm like, well, that's like life just snapped like that, and respectful of that process, but also what could be the conversation between the two quote unquote ends of life.
You make such a good point. Thank you so much for, first of all, showing up in your beautiful yellow wall. You make such a good point about birth and death, and how we hold both those two things, yet we often view birth as sacred and beautiful and joyous and what a great occasion, and death, oh God, no, please, never, under any circumstances. And yet they both are just markers of change in this human experience that we have. In the Going with Grace training program, gratefully, there's been a bunch of new birth doulas that are coming, or birth doulas that are coming newly into this space, that are interested in finding ways to bridge the gap, and also just to bring the practice from one to the other. I recently got to speak at Infinito, Brazil. Infinito is an organization, the first major end-of-life organization in Brazil. And it was so fun to hear their ideas about how we care for folks at the end of life, and was in conversation with the birth doula, which, thank God they asked me the question second. They asked her first, and every single time I just be like, what she said, what she said, what she said, what she said, because they're the same about how we're showing up for it, how we get to be with people that are in this transitional space. Life itself is a liminal space, yet during the birthing process, from the moment the contractions begin until we have a baby in front of us, that's a deep, rich liminal space. And then also in the active dying process is another liminal space, when we are laboring to die. There are such similarities between the two. Yet I think it could do us a lot of benefit to pay attention to what we're doing in birth and migrate it over into death, so we can hold both as actually sacred, and not just the one that brings life and whoopee, but the one that ends it. Oh no, there's beauties in both. And realistically, we don't know. Death could be the birth into something new. The womb as the first grave is something that I was thinking about a lot, because we're dying into an experience there and being birthed into something new. The womb itself is a grave. Aside from those that experience death within the womb, we also die from it into breathing, living, being here. Lastly, I also want to acknowledge that absolutely, when talking about racial disparities in the medical system, the rates of infant and mother mortality in birth is a massive one, when that's something that needs to be considered as well. This one area where birth doulas, I think, are really useful in the end of life space, because there are many that birth that don't live past the birth, not only the infant, but also the mother. And it's a great place where we continue to keep bridging the gap. That answer your question?
Thank
or
you.
Address? Okay, thank you, Dr. G.
Thank you, Dr. J. I think KR, you said you cannot raise your hand. Let's try. I will unmute you now and see if we can see you and hear you.
KR.
Okay.
There you are.
I'm
Okay.
double timing here. Hi, Alua. Good to see you again. It's only been less than 12 hours, I guess. Anyway, my question, what was my question? I have so many always. I think it has to do with, and you know that I have concerns about this, how we can educate people who are interested in the death doula movement And all people who are, I mean, there's been all these other people who are questioning where this fits into the bigger picture, into the way that we serve people who are dying and their loved ones. You're providing a particular approach that is very different from, well, I don't know how very different, but it could be very different from a lot of other approaches. And how does this, what are your thoughts about how it all fits together and how people don't get get confused when they're trying to identify how death doulas might be able to assist them?
I think what you're asking is how doulas fit into the larger system as a whole and how we are able to offer support to those that need us. Is that accurate?
Yes, and also, but keeping the factor that there's a huge amount of diversity in the death doula world as well.
Okay, I see. In terms of our services and how we show up for people, etc.
And approaches and interests and yeah.
Got it. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. As a baseline, I think it's really important that we have some organization and some basic standards of our work, so that it's pretty clear that, you know, this is what a death doula does, and these are the basic skill sets that a death doula should have. However, I think since there are 7.8 billion of us on this planet, and we will all die our individual ways, we're all going to need support in various ways, which means that the skill set that each of us have needs to reflect who we are, which will allow those that need our skills to get support the way that works best for them. I am not always the best death doula for people. Similarly, I'm not the only, or should be one of few, end-of-life spokespersons, because not everybody's gonna be able to hear it from me. Similarly, I'm not gonna be the best to be at the bedside of everyone. I certainly take calls sometimes and I'll chat with them a bit and think, oh, I know somebody who might work out a little bit better for them, either based on their skill set or their personality or location or who knows what. I think that the diversity in our field is really useful. It can create a challenge when it comes to conversations about professionalization. Yet, I really support the diversity in what we're doing overall, so that we can show up for proper support. You know, if a Mormon shows up at my bed, shows up at my bed, oh Lord, if I show up at the bedside, if I show up at the bedside of somebody who's Mormon, for example, I'm not really familiar with the belief system and structure. I could ask a lot of questions and ask to see if I'm still a good fit for them. And if not, then we find somebody else. And if they say we still want to work with you, then I'll do my best. But spiritual beliefs is just one area where the diversity is present. Some of us are doing a lot more practical work. We're doing a lot of documents and paperwork and doing end-of-life planning. And a lot of people want to sit bedside, or some people want to help out after a death. People want to be really present with grief. I think that's all a benefit to us overall, as long as we have systems in place that serve as an organizing body, like the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, which I think does our work a massive favor in that it provides a container for all of us to work in. If you haven't heard of the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, it's a 501c6 organization that serves to organize death doulas and to provide some basic core competencies of the work that we do to create some type of linearity overall. That address your question, Karen?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much for asking it.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. So should we go to Griff? Are you there? Can we?
Yeah.
Yes, you're already unmuted.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I actually have kind of a follow-up or just a related question, I believe, to that. But two, I like sharing vulnerable shares of. It's been delightfully and almost overwhelmingly like the experience of just like the infectious energy you have. It's like my heart is even now, it's like pounding, and I've been flushed almost the entire time. And it's just like it's such a cool example of how someone that embraces death is living well. And actually, I also have an additional story that I heard a podcast about 1.5 years ago with you on it. And then like ever since then, I just jokingly said, okay, when I retire, I'm going to become a death doula. Like that's my new dream job. And I'm a social entrepreneur, and I've been helping like Latino kids with developmental disabilities for the last 12 years. But now I'm building an intentional dying community based on, honestly, it sparked at that podcast that I heard. So thanks for, you seem like you actually are really spreading the word around. But my question is this: I meet with a lot of hospice, home care and hospice companies, and I feel like I'm confronting. I mean, it feels like a almost systemic resistance to having death doulas be involved, and it's definitely something how I'm curious on how to break through some of those. But yeah, do you have any? Because it seems like that's kind of where a lot of the stuff is happening, and a lot of the unnecessary suffering is happening. Do you have any kind of guidance or feedback on what to do there?
Yeah. And this actually kind of goes back to the first part of Karen's question, which I realize now we didn't get to, which is how we fit into the greater system. If I have my druthers, which for as long as I'm breathing and living, I think I'm going to keep doing this, it won't be long until we are accepted as part of the regular medical care system. Not everybody's going to want us, not everybody's going to need us, but some will. And it won't be long, I'm going to just keep going out there and talking about death doulas as much as possible so that those that want our services can find us and can have access to it. In an ideal world, which we would have the hospitals, we'd have medical care folks, we'd have grief people, we'd have estate planning attorneys, we'd have life insurance people, we'd have the funeral people, we'd have death doulas, we'd have space for everybody so that those that need the support can find it. One thing that I found is that the tide is certainly changing. You know, there's a lot more press about death doulas and a lot of conversation around it, and more people are interested in doing the work. Interest in the Going with Grace training program has grown tremendously. What I'm finding is that there's a shift in how we're talking about dying overall. That is one of the gifts, if you will, of the pandemic, is that now it's coming up a lot more in conversation, which means that there are people that are starting to look at ways in which we've done it thus far, the ways that they want to do it for themselves, and the ways in which we're doing it big picture. When I started out formally, I hit every hospice in Los Angeles that would just give me any time at all, and just got beat down by it, because at every turn they were like, we don't need it, we already do it, thanks for coming. And they'd have like a cup of tea for me and then I'd leave. And it was disheartening. It was disheartening because I could see so clearly how we could fit into the team, yet it wasn't available yet. Now I will say hospices call me and want me to come and give presentations about the work and are interested in finding ways to integrate us. There is the End-of-Life Doula Council of the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, which is inviting us to speak about our work and do our best to educate the members of the NHPCO about the work of a death doula. I think if you just keep going, when we just keep going, it won't be long until a shift occurs. As I said, if I have my druthers, we're going to be everywhere. We're going to be as part of the school system and HR systems and home healthcare agencies and hospices and certainly hospitals. I think that there's a rightful place for us in all society, because it is it's the reason why society exists, is because we die. And so important for us to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And keep going, okay? Just keep going.
Yeah.
Victoria, do you want to bring it back to you, or we have about 15 more minutes and there are more questions coming in?
There's two more questions. Two more people raised their hands, and there was another one that was put on the chat. I think it would be great for those to be answered.
Okay, then we start with Meg, an old-time SAND community member. Missing you in person, Meg. You're unmuted.
So grateful to be with you. Oh, I was looking at my name tag the other day from last year. I was going to hold it up, but I'm huggable and all that good stuff. I'm so happy to meet you because I've read about you for so long, and I had not yet been able to hear your voice and see your spirit shining through like this. And I wanted to say so much about this birth death doorways that as a midwife, I discovered with my father dying, this is really reminding me of something. This is the same doorway from two directions. And the one thing about that I like to carry from birth to death is a trust in the process. I mean, the midwife is like, maybe this is like how the apple gets ripe on the tree. I mean, this is, when supported with water and sunshine and care and attention, this is how the apple falls from the tree. This is how so that trust in the process. And so then the first question when I raised my hand was about, what is in this carrying the thread of Stephen Jenkinson, one of the parts that's most compelling to me about Stephen's work is the part about very strong views that he has that may be considered controversial in the assisting end of life.
Mm-hmm.
And his say, why do we need to always make it ours? Why do we need to claim that level of agency? It kind of reminds me of in birth, you know, when I was like, oh, yes, I'm aligned with the couple. Oh, wait, I'm aligned with the mother. Oh, wait, the baby's not born yet, but I'm aligned with the baby.
Mhm.
This is who I'm advocating. This is who I'm serving. And with my father, I felt the same, like, oh, I'm here to serve my parents. Well, I'm not sure about my mother. I'm here to serve my father. And then it was like, no, I'm here to serve something more eternal than my father, who we've moved past roles, my father and I. You know, I'm tending that, and I'm protecting it from any intrusions of, you know, the calls back here. We want you back here. We want you with your name tag on. You know, no, there's no name tags. We get to surrender the name tags, and that's funny, I started with name tag, but we get to surrender the name tag and trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks a million different ways. And so what do you feel though about that, Stephen's point about supporting, I don't even want to put any bias one way or the other, but I wonder how you feel about that, because I feel sort of as Stephen does about that one thing.
Lots of thoughts. First, about trusting the process. Yes, always. And thank you for presencing that the body knows how to die, and we just get to be able to show up as a witness to it. But the body knows how to die. We trust the body inherently to do billions of things over the course of the day. How many times does your heart beat right now without even thinking about the fact that it does so? We trust it inherently. And so we also get to trust it when it's time to die. We trust in the process. We trust. This idea about self-determination and us using the opportunity to bring it into our own hands, I think that was the question that you're asking. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I believe strongly that every individual has the right to choose whatever they want to choose.
Sure.
Yeah, this is their right. And if it is to self-determine. And if it is to be with the process of whatever suffering and learning and beauty and joy and pain that happens as we are dying, then so be it. The laboring that's happening, then so be it. As I mentioned, my role, certainly professionally, is to be with people exactly where they are, for who exactly they are, right? Not to get them from one place to another, not to make them think about something else, not to have them think of death as beautiful, just be with them where they are for who they are. I need to put myself aside, because when I say that this isn't right for you, that is me entering myself into the conversation, and it's not about me. I'll get my death at some point. I'll get my own death at some point. Then I get to do it the way that I want to do it. And up until then, you do it how you want to do it. You want to self-determine, I cheer. Yeah.
I want to say how much, when you say that, I get zapped with the energy of Henry when I trained with Enelda. And I have not completed my certification with Enelda. I'm kind of between two states, but California and Colorado, but now moving toward family in Colorado, where I can be continuous throughout the year and be a better hospice volunteer, and moving toward doulaship. But Henry, definitely, you probably have met Henry of Enelda. Yes, I really got that, like, no, it's not you, it's not you, it's not you, it's not.
It's not you, it's not you, it's not you. This goes back to the conversation we're having earlier with Beatrice about, you know, us keeping ourselves as much as we can out of the equation. Not my death. I will get mine later. Not my death. I will definitely get mine. And when I do it how I want to do it. But up until then, do you, boo. I think do you, boo is a beautiful, it's a mantra for not only how we do death, but it could really support us in how we're doing life. You know, I may not understand it, but I'm just gonna be here with you in it. Do you, boo? Yeah.
All right, my friends, we're running out of time, and I really want us to get to Valerie for the final question, and then we'll come back. Valerie, can you please make it really succinct?
Absolutely. I really want to be able to work collaboratively. I also echo everything that was just said about Inelda. I trained with Henry. I actually am in mortuary school now because I want to see this integration. I'm trying to figure out how to best get everybody together and in on it, just to be facilitators, not to stamp what people should be doing, but what do you want to do? And let me validate that and facilitate that for you. That's what I see my goal is. But what could you say to get what I know you said there's been more collaboration or more hospices listening to you, but what could we do you think, to work better together?
Part of the challenge that we have is that there's people, we tend to think of this as proprietary work and proprietary information. And this is not mine. It was never mine. It wasn't, I didn't make it, it was given to me. And I continue to share it as much as possible. Provided anybody is approaching this as like mine and yours, we're never gonna breach that, right? If we're all working in concert for the good of the person who's dying and for whatever support system they need, then we can actually move forward. But that's a big work to be done. And I think that our current system, certainly when it comes to the conversation around race, is showing us how often we hold things as mine versus yours, as opposed to ours, and how do we collectively move toward a system that works better for all. Yeah, practically, it would keep showing up. We keep showing up. I mean, we're kind of not going away. And it seems like we're getting louder, so they don't really have a choice anyway. But if they can see us consistently as just an extra set of hands, eyes, ears, and heart showing up for the process, which ultimately serves the person who's dying, what is the problem? It's not yours, it's not mine. It belongs to all of us. Let's just all do it together. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. And wow, let's go ahead and take a collective breath together. Let's just, let's just be with this. Alua, I want to remind you of some of your words, and then please close us out. If you're the death doula for this time, you say, we need to bring presence, bring ourselves back, stop future casting. We need to be with the unknown and trust in the process. I added from the last, trust in the process. Death and birth, yay. Close us out. What do you want to close us out with?
First of all, did I actually say that? Birth,
yes,
yay!
Yes, you did, because you were saying, I'll explain to you later. Yes.
Yay! It's actually how I feel. Birth and death, yay. Somebody who I love tremendously, Yofi Ando, keeps saying repeatedly, it is what it is. And also every time I ask him how he's doing, he says he's just joyfully alive. What a beautiful way to be, right? Like, we have an opportunity every single day, and it's a high bar, but every single day to wake up and remember the tremendous gift and the very, very strange ride it is to be in these bodies on a ball that's rotating through space at a very fast pace. That in and of itself, our very existence in and of itself is an absolute miracle. Absolute miracle. The rest is just icing on the cake. Birth, death, yay! Yay!
my God.
Thank you so much. Turning it back to you, Zion, Mauricio. Take us out.
Oh my
What a
God.
delight. What a joyful aliveness you're radiating.
Thank you.
Lua,
Oh
thank
my
Thank you so
God.
much for having me. This has been so fun. I wish I could come in person too.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything you would like to share how people can follow up with your work or something about?
Sure. You can find me on the internet as usual, goingwithgrace.com, on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm there. They can find me pretty easy.
Yay! Oh my God, Gord.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alua.